G'day and welcome again to another Campfire Project discussion. And today, the panel discussion, we have, first of all, Angela Heiser from Queensland. Angela is a leadership and productivity coach. How are you, Angela?
Very well. Thank you, Alan.
Lovely Good to have you here again, isn't it?
Great beard. I really like it.
I got lazy over Christmas and forgot to shave. So there you go. Then we also have transformational spruther, Heather Joy Bassett. How are you, Heather?
Yeah, very well. Thanks for having us here.
You're down in Melbourne, so we're pretty lucky to have you with the air quality down there at the moment. Yeah. So, thanks for being here. And then over in London, we have Paul Stretton-Stephens, who is a coach, author and speaker. How are you, Paul?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, it's good to have you all here. And I know that we had a bit of a chat before about a particular subject we thought might be interesting. And Paul, you had mentioned about how to deal with things that are beyond our control and contribution. And you mentioned like the fires here in Australia. And then Angela, you mentioned about the things that might not be our responsibility, but is it our problem? So I think it'd be a great conversation. So Paul, would you like to kick us off with why you thought that subject would be a good one at this time? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. The other day I was listening to the news and we had some Australian expats here in the UK, and a lot of their friends and family are over, back home in Australia, and they were here and they just felt helpless. And they were being interviewed, and they said, "Look, what can we do?" And there was 3 being interviewed, and they're all in probably around about their 30s, and a couple have got partners here in the UK, another one had got a job in the UK, and they just couldn't up sticks and leave and go and help. So they had to think of another way of doing that, and they seemed to get their heads together with a small expat community in London, and they said, "Look, why don't we put some events on, Australian-based events if we can, some barbecues, some music, and raise funds so we can send the funds out to Australia, and then they can help." I think they were sending it to the Red Cross so that they could distribute it evenly. And then there was another couple of ladies over here. The daughter lives here, she's Australian, and her mother's come to visit her, and of course all the fires had hit their particular area. And they were quite into having crafts, making crafts for the wildlife, for the recovery centres and rescue centres. And they were trying to encourage people with the craft guild to do the same, but send everything back over to Australia to help out.
Nice.
I thought that would be a really good topic, because in crisis, they just felt helpless initially. But when they got together and started to support one another, then they came to a common purpose and found a way where they could actually help, and that helped them through this. So I thought that would be really useful to talk about.
Yeah, because you're really sitting there watching something that you can't really do anything about, you can't contribute to in any way or on your own, and it's devastating, especially when it's family and friends that could be going through that. So
absolutely,
the need.
I mean, these were visibly distraught, I'm told.
Yeah. What were your thoughts on that subject, Angela?
Well, as Paul was saying, that sense of hopelessness that we have at the moment. I mean, when Heather and I were talking earlier about the air quality in Melbourne and how terrible it is, and reading articles about how the stratosphere is covered with dust at the moment from the fires, and how it's not really our responsibility to fix that, but it is our problem. And so what are we going to do? Because we seem to differentiate between this. We get upset about it, but then we don't do anything. And we say it's for somebody else to fix it. We can blame other people. But what is it that we can specifically do? Which I think is a really important thing. Because as Paul was saying, that sense of helplessness, that is there something we can do to contribute instead of just sitting on the sideline and hoping it's going to go away or somebody will fix it or anything like that. And in today's world, I think it's more important than ever, because we've become so good at accelerating issues and, and creating more problems than ever before. So,
as you say, we push on to other
democratic
people,
problem. The democratic process is clearly not working as well as we need it to do.
Well, as you mentioned before, we talk about it's not my responsibility, so therefore it's not my problem, is usually the comments that's made. But really, you know, it may not be your responsibility, but yes, it's still going to be your problem. You know, somebody else, you want someone else to fix it. As I say, you point with one finger, there's three fingers pointing back. So everyone's trying to pass it to everybody else all the time. So with you, with being in Melbourne with the air quality and everything else down there, because you're not in the fires themselves, are you, Heather? The fires are away from you, but the smoke's just been coming over and engulfing Melbourne itself.
Yeah, so I look at you know, the struggle here in Melbourne, and we're not even in it. So it's not like the properties around me are being demolished and the wildlife around me are being demolished. And so I can't, well, part of me says I can't even imagine what they're going through, but I grew up in country Victoria. My dad was a firefighter. He would come home minus his eyebrows, minus his eyelashes, you know, hair gone. And I can remember just sitting there in awe of like this blackened person coming through. So even though I say can't imagine it, I grew up around that. And I just am so grateful that you know, I'm not in that at the moment. And as you say, it is, you know, where does the line run about what we are responsible for, but also how can we give back? And for me, if we start putting posts in social media about the pointing the fingers rather than the solutions, then that doesn't to me create any help for anyone. So it's like, if we focus on, okay, what are the solutions? Yes, there's a problem, but in this desperate time, it's like, cool, how can we help? What are the solutions? How can we lift the vibration around that? I think that's equally as important in the dire straits of it. But I also understand that people who are really, really hurting, you know, they're going to be blaming, because that's part of the journey as well.
Being able to get the pressure off their shoulders by putting it onto somebody else's. You know, we are emotional beings, and you know, I know on social media the blaming is going to come into that emotional empathy area where people feel someone's pain. They don't want to feel it themselves, so people are taking sides and blaming. And getting to an area, well, what we need to do is get shoulder to shoulder and go, okay, let's go to compassion and empathy, where we go, rightio, what's the solution to this? How do we fix it?
So I love hearing that we've got the expats in, you know, around the world banding together, and that's one of the things. There was a young man who wrote a poem, and someone sent it to me, and I put it on my wall, and it just got me so deeply, like the sense of emotions that are hitting home for Australians, but not only Australians, like just people generally around the world. It's been phenomenal how tragedy brings people together.
Because we know that the smoke from Australia, well, first of all, it was in New Zealand. They were talking about it, but I also heard that it travelled that 11,000 kilometres to Chile. But now they're talking about the air quality that we have at the moment. That will move. It'll go right around the globe and come back again.
Yeah.
So how long does it take to get this stuff to dissipate? But that's the scientific stuff that we need to know. But what can we do in the meantime? How can we become part of the solution to the problem?
Yeah. And then one of the things is there'll be people who really respond now, and then there'll be people who, because often you'll get it's almost like a tidal wave of enthusiastic, passionate people, and then it sort of dies off, and then there'll be other people who come through. I don't know this as a science, but then there'll be people who are slower to respond, but are still there for the long haul of being there. So I think that's one of the things. You know, there are people who really called to do something right now, but then there'll be people who are called to do something later and at a different time and a different way, and then honouring everyone's process of how they give back, I think, is really important.
Yeah. So, Angela, your area of expertise is in the emotions and understanding how things affect. And as Heather just said, there'll be some people who will respond quickly and some that will respond later on. Is there any sort of indication as to, we look at and we go, okay, well, what sort of people respond up front, what people respond further down the track?
Oh, I wish that was a straightforward answer. Well, people who respond quickly are generally more, I would say they probably are more in touch with their empathy. They can understand that this is a very difficult situation. That doesn't mean that the people who respond later don't have the empathy. They may just have a different thinking process or a different sense of urgency or whatever it might be. And again, sometimes people sit on things for a while before they actually act on something. I mean, the one thing that I find sometimes a bit difficult is am I going to help with alleviating the symptom, or am I going to alleviate the cause? I mean, there's more behind the fires. You know, it's like, and we can get very political here, and we can talk about all sorts of issues, but that's not what we're here for. It's about saying, what are we going to do? And this is what I'm saying is, it's the democratic process we also need to have a look at, for example, because it's not really working that well.
That's it.
And people have given away a lot of responsibility and said, you are the people we've elected, you fix it. And these people, and I'm totally generalizing here, I'm very aware of this, are often in a place where they just do what they think they should be doing, but there's not much conferring with the people who have voted for them anymore. And we're creating these, you know, what we call the nanny states, where we're just removing a lot of responsibility from people participating in the process. So when things like this happen, people who jump into action may be going, oh, finally I can do something. I don't know. I mean, these are just my thoughts. I just find it sometimes a little bit frustrating, because I want to do something, but then it's really hard to know what to do, whether that has actually an impact or not.
Yeah, because if you just, you know, you say you're just working on the symptoms, and we're putting it to our government and saying, hey, you guys have got to do something about this. Well, they're going to have to get us to do something for them to be able to do something in the first place. So it's going to come back to us anyway. So,
yeah, but the thing is, and I might just, because I've just heard about that today, is we need to know what's going on. We need to be involved in this. But a lot of these things just happen behind closed doors. Did you know that they've just sold the native, the Aboriginal rights in Queensland to Adani? They've made the land rights null and void. So, you know, it's like, if we don't know that this is happening, we can't do anything about it. And that's sometimes a little bit challenging. So when is it my problem? When is it my responsibility?
That's the big question. If it is your responsibility, then it is your problem as well. But then it may not be your responsibility, but it's still your problem.
Yeah. So what are we going to do? Catch 22, chicken egg.
Yeah. And if it affects people around you, it's going to affect you as well. There's no getting away from that side of it. Yeah. So, Paul, what other thoughts did you have on this?
I was just thinking from what the ladies were saying there and what you've been saying, that there seems to be three different narratives involved here when there are circumstances beyond your control. There's that initial narrative, that internal dialogue is like, you know, what could I have done differently? Could I have helped? Could I have done something differently, you know, to prevent this? But and then you get the narrative of the information release, and that's controlled by external. We're not in control of that information release, are we? The powers that be are in control of disseminating that, and we're only fed what they want us to understand. And then later on, there is the analysis of when everything's blown over, the analysis of that and the evaluation of, you know, what's happened, how can we prevent it in the future, and then the people may get a say then. So there's all these different narratives going on at various points within an incident, and whether that's an incident of the magnitude of the fires in Australia, or I'll give you an example. I used to live in Spain, and a couple of friends of ours 2 years ago, and again, unfortunately, this is a fire incident. They worked in a really big factory that supplied bread for a supermarket. And they were both on holiday, and they came back and they found out that the whole factory had burnt to the ground, and it employed hundreds of people. And this is a national supermarket in Spain. And they were devastated like everybody else in the local community, because it provided a lot of input into the local economy, a lot of jobs, and fed all the supermarkets. It provided everybody. They were then told the only way we can retain you is to send you to another city in Spain and work at another factory. And they disseminated all the employees they could to different factories throughout Spain. And they said it would take a year to reconstruct the place. So they had to up sticks and relocate for a whole year. Now, they were devastated. It was totally beyond their control. And their narrative was really negative, because they got family, they're very community based over there, family in the same street, they had a daughter studying in university, couldn't just leave, so their whole world had fallen apart. But even since then, the knock-on effect from that is that they were told, oh, it's going to be 2 years now. So they've been away for 2 years and coming back every other weekend, and now they're told it's never going to be built again. And if you want to stay working within the supermarket, you have to go work in one of the local supermarkets to where you live. Now, the lady in the couple is fine with that, because she's quite sociable and outgoing and happy to be customer facing and that sort of thing. But the husband, he's quite happy to be behind the scenes, and he is absolutely devastated. Now, he has yet to change his narrative, and it's been 2 years. Now, some people are really slow to change that narrative and really have that tunnel vision. And won't listen to anybody external or even people close. So I'll be interested to see what the ladies think about that, because everybody's tried everything with this guy to sort of bring him out. And his wife's really frustrated now. And this isn't the magnitude of the fires in Australia, but for them it's devastating. And I think we need to sort of bear that in mind, that not being in control of your life through other circumstances can happen at any time to any of us.
Yes, and
we have to learn to deal with those.
That situation is very much similar to anybody who's lost a home over here. Yes, we've lost over 2,000 homes. About 27 people have died. But if we've lost 2,000 homes, there's 2,000 families who have been displaced, and it's the same as for each one of them, it's their home that's been displaced. Same as that guy, his home's been displaced as well. Yeah. Depends on how people actually handle it. What do you ladies think?
Well, that's such a big one, because every one of us adapts and changes, and in our own time and in our own place, and with the right incentives, and not the right incentives. That's like, did that came out of my mouth? Don't like that. Doesn't taste very good. But often when someone's struggling, everyone wants to fix. And of course, as soon as we want to fix someone because they've got the problem, then it's often because we're really uncomfortable with where they're at, and then we're uncomfortable with ourselves around them. So yeah, it's a fascinating one to go, well, come on, you need to get on board quicker, and you need to change, and you should be where I'm at, because every single person's evolution is different, and there's something that connects with people, and no matter how hard we try to push people along, I've rarely seen that it works. I've rarely seen that it works. It really is taking that that moment when something drops in, where it's like, you know what, okay, it's time. So
because it's not really taking them forward, it's really us wanting to get away from the pain that we've picked up from them, because we're being empathetic. We pick up their problems. I used to say that a problem shared is a problem halved. Well, really a problem shared, when it's in emotional empathy, is a problem magnified, because two people have got it now, and whenever one is starting to let it go, the other one brings it back again. So it's self-feeding.
Yeah.
And quite often when we're trying to move somebody forward, it's because we feel uncomfortable. It's got nothing to do with them. They're the one who's got the problem. But that's what we are, because we're emotional beings. Angela.
In response to Paul, people and everybody else, there's a difference for me between transition and change. Change is when something finishes and something new happens. It's like it's a break. you know, I move house. I live in one house and now I live in another house. But there's a whole transition process that happens along with that. So there's the grief of letting go of something, which generally comes with lots of confusion and chaos and where am I going to go? But it's also inspiring, and it can be opening up new possibilities. But that doesn't happen for everybody. A lot of people stay in the drama of letting go, excuse me, of grieving much longer than other people. Like, I know that I just go, oh, something's changed. Okay, that is not what I expected. Okay, what can I do with this? But there are some things where I really need to transition into something slowly, and then out of it again into something new, because I may not have formed a plan yet. I may not know where that takes me. And even if I'm really flexible, that can be different completely from situation to situation. And so therefore, again, as you said, if we push somebody along, that may completely backfire because they may not be at that place yet.
And
I think that's a good, sorry.
No, I'll just add, one of my friends is an expert in grief. And the thing is, you can't move grief along. You just, that process is your process. So, yeah, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say as well, I mean, obviously losing your home in the fires or your work and having to relocate, you're in a grief process, aren't you? So, yeah. I understand that. Yeah, I mean, it's devastating for them. But I also think there's it depends, also depends on how you deal with it, depends on what you've previously experienced. So I'm talking about a guy here who's been in the same place for 20 years. You know, he's become very familiar with his surroundings, very familiar with everybody there, very familiar with the work. Just like the people who've lost their homes, they're very familiar with their town, their communities, their homes, their jobs. And all of a sudden they have this unfamiliar situation. And that's what's really difficult to deal with. Now, the flip side of that is, I'll give you an example. I mean, I went to 12 different schools. So being in the same school with the same teachers, with the same friends in the same place, for me was not familiar, but change was familiar. So for me, things that have happened along in my life, and the longest I've ever lived in one place in the whole of my life is 9 years, you know, and I'm 58. So I've had quite a few different moves for various reasons and occupations. So I find myself, I change quite easily. I adapt to change. And it's what you said earlier on, actually, Heather, I think about being the ability to adapt to the new situation or to the circumstance or to the new environment that gives you that impetus. Now, if you're not used to that, you're going to deal with it in a very different way. If you are used to it, you're going to deal with it in another way. And I think it really depends on that previous experience as well.
I think I totally agree with that. And I think I like looking at profiles. So if we look at the Gallup strengths profile, which is a pretty world-renowned and accepted profile, then, you know, if adaptability is your 34th strength, then guess what? You're going to have a much harder time than if adaptability is in your top 5 strengths. And is some of that innate, or is it because of lived experience? Is it because of learned experience? Who knows? But either way, if it's way down and then we're trying to drag someone from our lens and then talking about, you know, being adaptable and flexible, but that's not actually the skill that will move them anyway, because it's their lesser strength. It's lower down on it. Then it's like, well, how do we engage in what is their strength to help them move forward? Because, yeah, people who have positivity as their top strengths, adaptability as their top strengths, then it's like, come on, what's your problem? Come on, move along. But these other people have strengths that are our lower strengths. That in that time, it's like, well, no, this is the strength that'll get you through. But it's like, cool, well, what is that other strength that we're going to tap into? Or, you know, if you love someone and there's that acceptance of where someone else is at, and you just hold their hand and tell them you love them where they're at, is that the answer? Yeah, don't know. Every situation is different. Because someone has something that's worked for them, and that's what I see happen a lot. Well, this has worked for me, so it should work for you. Just do that. That's a totally different person we're looking at there. You know, that's not automatically going to work for the next person.
Because all the things that we've, you know, when you look at it, all those conditions around us, we're complex beings with the sum of all of our experiences.
Yeah.
And so it's always in constant change. As we have new experiences, you know, our strengths are going to, the order of those is going to change depending on what's going on around us. But as you said, two people are going to be different to each other, and one can't put their expectations on the other person and expect to get a result. The only person they put those expectations on are themselves.
Yeah.
The problem is in society, we're expecting people to change faster and faster. I mean, we're exposed to so much change. I mean, like, I'm sure if I turn on my phone now, it will say, please update 170 apps or something like that. Everything is changing all the time, and we're supposed to adapt to these things really, really quickly. And we don't give ourselves time for these emotions anymore. You know, like, for example, the DSM-5 in the US, you know, the Handbook for Psychiatrists has now defined that under certain circumstances, grief is already defined as a mental illness if it takes longer than two weeks. So you can be medicated if somebody decides that you are experiencing prolonged grief. Now, there's specific conditions, but if you find them, you will be able to apply that. You know, I mean, I remember that when I grew up, now we wear clothes in a totally different way, but when somebody was in mourning, they would wear black clothes for half a year. And it would be expected that you left them alone. You just gave them the space to grieve. But we don't do that anymore. People go to, they bury somebody, but their beloved person, and they go to work the next day. And there's an expectation that, you know, they'll get through that.
Yeah, as you say, we're putting people in boxes all the time. We're giving them time frames in which they've got to get to a certain level, because it's got nothing to do with the person. It's to do with us and what we want.
Yeah.
You know, medicating children all the time, you know, because their traits, personality traits are they're on the move all the time. They're kids that have to be doing things. So we put them in a spot and say, right, sit still. And then we find that they can't sit still. So then we medicate them to make sure they do sit still. You know, the thought of saying that grief takes a certain amount of time, no more than this and no more of that. And if it takes more than that, we medicate. But who's running the asylum? Is it the inmates?
Yeah.
It's crazy. Because somebody's decided that, well, I've got a certificate or whatever. This is what I believe. Therefore, we'll impose that onto everybody else. It's another form of political correctness going crazy, where one group that aren't dealing with their things put it onto everybody else in the larger group, and everyone else has got to conform.
I'm quite in shock at the moment at hearing that grief, if you're in that for more than 2 weeks, is being labelled as a medical condition that one needs to that one can be medicated.
There's some certain conditions around it, but if you want to read it that way, you can.
Yeah. And instead, that's what I'm sharing, my experience now. So it's not, if I want to read it that way, it's like I'm sharing my experience now of my life's experience and being around that, just thinking like, wow, how can that ever be? And again, you know, I'm not sharing my knowledge of, because I haven't read any of that stuff, but I look forward to talking with my friend who specializes in that and saying, hey, is that a thing? And one of the most stressful times in someone's life is moving house. Can't remember where I read that, but that's the most stressful thing. And that's often when that person has chosen it. Even if I've chosen it, it's still one of the most stressful times in my life. And then, so if you don't actually choose it, then that stress is then exponential. So again, the people who are being displaced from these people, your friends or the people in Spain, and then the people in the fires, then again, it's just how high can stress go?
Yeah, because it's a forced displacement, whereas if someone chooses, oh, I want to move to another state or whatever, completely different impact. They're still moving home, but it's a different impact. I had a chat with one of our other members today, and she's moved 58 times in her life. From Australia to America and all over the place. And Angela, well, we're looking straight there at a gypsy anyway.
I've lived in 9 different countries, worked in 16, and I lived out of a suitcase for almost 4 years, and during that time I slept in 278 beds between 9 different countries. So yeah.
And so, and some of that would have been choice because wanting to move on and do things, and other of it would have been a bit put pressure on you because you had to do that for the work.
Yeah.
And therefore you'd have different feelings each time you made those different moves.
But it was always, whenever, it's like it happened that a landlord would say, oh, I want to move back into the apartment or things like that. I was always treated like an opportunity. I would always say, oh, there's something else around the corner, and see if I can get something that's even better than what I've got right now. But I went through the grief part, but mine is fairly short. When it comes to things like that, I go, oh, well, cry a little bit and then move on.
And so it comes down to the way you choose to handle it and how you choose to look at it.
Yeah.
But that's a choice that you had made, whereas somebody else, we can't tell them, well, this is what we've done, therefore this is what you should do, because it doesn't fit their particular, as you said, their strengths and other things and all the experiences of their life.
Yeah.
And, as we say, if they're in a particular situation, we want to help. It's not our responsibility, the situation, but we want to contribute to actually help them. But we've got to make sure that we're contributing in the way that they need the contribution, not in what we feel that we need to do. Because that feeling we have is about our emotions around it. All we're doing is serving ourselves and not serving them.
Yeah. Which is that prescription that we talked about before, like we're just medicating people. And I've seen this. I mean, I've had clients I had one client who lost his partner after 3 years of caring for her in cancer. And within 2 weeks, he was on antidepressants. So again, it's like, what kind of support do we give people that works for them? Do we take the time to actually find out? Or do we go straight into rescue mode or fix-it mode, or, into that space of, oh, well, as you said, everything's going to be okay. Let's just move on.
It very much comes down to that. Paul?
I was thinking just from the individual's point of view, that's in a circumstance such as this, which they can't control, everything's beyond their control. Is there a sort of any guidelines or a recipe we can give them to sort of help them as an individual on their way without the external support of therapists and all this sort of thing? Can we just say to them, look, determine what you can control in this situation. You can't control everything because it's beyond your control, it's external, but determine to what level you can control things. And then focus your influence in that particular area. And that, I think when I've spoken to a few clients before, going through that particular, those 2 steps helps a lot. And from that point, they tend to get a foothold and move forward a little bit. Sometimes it's, they take off and they go off in great big strides and they just keep going. Some are really baby footsteps, and really tentatively moving forward, but there is forward movement. And I think it's that just determining what you can control. You know what you can't control, so you need to think of what you can control and then focus on the influence you have.
That's it.
Isn't that the serenity prayer from the Alcoholics Anonymous?
Is it?
Yeah, God grant me the courage to change the things I can.
And to accept the things
I cannot change, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Know the difference.
That's right. Okay. And the second step is to move forward and focus on your influence that you have got.
Not just recognize what you can change and what you can't. Actually take action on the things that you can change.
Absolutely.
That's where people seem to forget. A lot of these little sayings like that, people go, oh, yep, okay, I recognize the difference. And I go, well, are you doing anything? And they go, oh, that wasn't part of it, was it? I go, yes. You've got to do something. You've got to move.
And also sometimes when people are around you, especially people who know you, if you start to think positively and start making steps forward, and they know the situation around you, they think, and that means you're out of your little box that they've got you in sometimes, and you can get a little bit of resistance there from the people around you that know you and love you from a nice point of view, but there is that little bit of resistance. And have you all seen that film Bridge of Spies with Tom Hanks and Mark Rylance?
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Well, basically, cut a long story short, it's set in America, and Mark Rylance plays a Russian spy who's been found out, and Tom Hanks plays an American attorney who's been appointed to defend him, which obviously doesn't make him the most popular lawyer in the land, I have to say. But Mark Rylance is just sat there, you know, and he's painting away, and Tom Hanks is getting really frustrated and irate, and he says, "Well, aren't you worried?" And the spy just looks at him and says, "Would it help?" And he just fully accepted, you know, it's beyond his control. His influence was zero. So he just carried on doing what he's doing, and whatever happens around him, happens around him. I don't advocate that for everybody, but I think taking steps to move forward really
That's the
helps.
whole thing about responsibility then as well, you know, hoping that somebody else will fix it on our behalf. We're just letting it go, which takes me back to this whole, how do we deal with things that are beyond our control? And do we take responsibility, or how are we responsible for that? And while we were discussing what I thought my initially the democratic process is not working that well, because I was just so frustrated with the whole Adani situation today, the mine situation, is that there are a lot of people who are initially completely frozen, or they are in grief, and they've turned that into the most amazing things, like parents who lose their children for drugs, put some programs in place. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how many people take personal tragedy and turn it into something that's amazing and that benefits thousands and thousands of people.
Absolutely.
And we can do that. We've got the power to do that.
So there's that choice that you make. Do you do that, or do you just sit back and go, well, woe is me, nothing's going to ever change? When you mentioned before about one person sitting back and going, well, there's not much I can do about getting worried about anything. I think what we should do is be looking at that when it comes to emotional empathy, when we jump in to try and take on someone else's issues, that there should be a reminder in there that it's the other person's problem. Yes, we support them, but ask ourselves, are we trying to help them fix their problem, or are we trying to get things changed because we don't feel comfortable? And if we don't feel comfortable, then we're adding to the problem that person has. We're not the solution in there at all. We've actually become part of the problem, because now we manifest it. We put urgency on something that may have needed to take a certain period of time, like the grief process, as you said, with some people, Angela, needs to take a certain time, and somebody else trying to push it forward because they think it should be that period, or they feel uncomfortable that somebody's in that state for that long. Then they're just putting their stuff onto the person who's going through that, and that's totally unfair. So we've got to be careful when we do get involved and we decide we want to help somebody. Ask ourselves, are we part of the solution in helping them get to the other side, or are we adding a problem because this is about how we're feeling? And we need to look at that very closely, I think. But the other thing is, as I said, you know, there's the old story called The Secret. Give it to the universe will provide, which was very much the same in the religious side. Give it to God and God will fix it. But then what does the God or universe fix? We haven't paid our part to show the universe or God what it is that we want to do. So we're always part of that process. So we want to change our life. We've got to be the catalyst to make the change. People who want to come along and help us, we've still got to be the catalyst to tell them what we need from them.
So I wonder if you go back to your friend in Spain who, from the outside to everyone else, sees as stuck, and whether the people around him are actually taking responsibility and saying, I'm really struggling because I see you as stuck, so I have a problem with where you're at, versus going, you're stuck, you need to fix it. And I see that over and over. And again, it's most of our journey. We start off very unconscious about things. maybe some people are born conscious. I don't know. But, you know, they start out with like, and when I bought Spruce is speak truth with love and compassion. And when that comes in, and when I talk to people about that, they start being honest for the first time. But some of their honesty is really outward faced, and they see it as a chance to really dump on people. And I'm like, that is not spruce. You may be speaking your truth, but you are not sprucing. You're not taking that ownership. So if everyone around him is taking that ownership of, okay, this is the reality. I can't go on like this. You can. I can't. So where are my boundaries? Where is my steps forward? But it's that full ownership of stuff. Then that's a totally different thing. So I know with my dad, he was like, you know, people say you need to give up smoking, you need to give up smoking. He was given an ultimatum. Either you move out or Heather moves out, because she can't live with you while you're smoking. And then he had a decision to make. And then he was responsible. But when it was just like, you need to give up smoking, you need to give up smoking, you need to give up smoking. It's like, yeah, you need to give up smoking. Okay, well, here it is, black and white. You do that or you do that. And so again, there are different things that make someone, that can be a catalyst for people. So there's the reality of a situation where someone's at. But yeah, the outward finger pointing there, I don't think I've ever, but I'm trying to think, have I ever seen it work? I don't know that I have.
No, I think when you have that outward finger pointing and, you know, that continual pressure from external elements, some people get really entrenched and go deeper into it. And certainly this guy, he just goes very insular, gets on his bike and goes riding, and nobody can speak to him then. It's just an avoidance. But the inevitable's coming, that leverage of you've got a job or you haven't got a job, you either accept it or you don't accept it, is coming.
Yeah. Well, it's avoidance, but it's also like when you're in survival mode, that's what it is. It's survival. It's protection. It's like, you know, that feeling of I can't cope and I don't have the answers and I don't know what to do and I can't, there's, you know, that story that people are stuck in. That's like, so, you know, one is avoidance, but two is just like hanging on by a thread. You know, people can be just hanging on like a thread, and on the outside feels like nothing's going on, and inside is absolutely imploding. So, but on the outside, it's like, oh, you're just stuck, you're not doing anything. And I'm like,
that's what we're here, isn't it? Because
do you want
the whole forum is about talking about things that we normally don't talk about, because there are lots of people who hold it in and they just don't care how they feel. And then something happens and we all sit there and go, oh, wow, I had no idea that was going on. And it's the ability to say to somebody, please talk to me. You know, and talk to me. Yes, talk to me at a time that works for you, but talk to me, and please don't wait so long.
And I think also there is, if you're in that kind of situation, it's not necessarily very healthy to talk to the people that you normally talk to. Find somebody external that's impartial that can give you support. Now, that doesn't have to be a coach or a therapist. It can be somebody, another worker who's been in a similar situation.
It can be the guy at the pub.
Actually got through it. A guy at the pub, whoever. But
find
support that's external to your normal circle.
Yeah,
it's actually, that's called, I've just learned that it's called weak ties, and how important these people are, and how we no longer connect with people like that because we're ordering online, we're doing things. We don't have the chat with the guy around the corner anymore. You know, I went into the post office the other day and somebody said, how are you? And I said, oh, I'm okay. And she said, what's going on? And so we had a chat about stuff that had just happened. And she shared something that had happened too. And we've known each other for quite a while. You know, but I know that we're not going to pick that up next time we talk about each other. It was just one of those, okay, let's just have a dump. Yeah. And that was perfectly okay. And obviously we don't go into massive detail and tell each other the deepest, darkest, most sordid secrets, but at least sometimes it's good to talk about what weighs on us. And we just sit there and we're fine. And we know what, you know what FINE stands for, right? Yeah.
Not your definition of fine.
Oh,
I'm sure there is.
Yeah, fucked up, irrational, neurotic, emotionally unavailable. Fine.
Mm.
So,
There's
you
a
know?
few versions on it, and they're
Yeah,
all
there are a
pretty
few.
accurate.
But it just basically means just don't talk to me. I'm okay, but I'm not really.
Yeah.
And as you
Yeah.
said, you know, we need to talk. We need to know that it's safe. And as you said, Paul, one of the things that I've found that when you got people who are close to you, they feel your pain because they feel they're close to you, and they want to get out of that feeling faster again. So they're probably, as you said, they're definitely not the right people to be guiding us at that point. We also know that if you've got a member of the family who's doing things differently to the rest of the family, they're entrepreneurial, they're starting to move forward, the rest of the family will tell them, oh, that won't work, because it's not that they don't think it won't work. They're afraid of losing that family member, because we're a tribe. We want that person. We don't want change, but the only thing that's constant in life is change.
Change.
Yeah.
My daughter would say, you know, she doesn't like change, and I would say, well, cool, I'll stick you back in nappies, give you a bottle and a dummy, because it is that, you know, it is that constant, it's that constant evolution. But the difference is we don't like change when someone else is foisting it on us. If we're doing our own change, then that's cool. We're constantly changing. But when it's that external someone else telling you, that's a whole other game.
That's right. As you said, Angela, when you're moving for somewhere you like to move, it's exciting and everything else. When you're moving because you have to move because you've had external pressures put on you, it's not so much fun. So it's when we have control, we're happy with it. When we don't have control, that's when the fear comes in. But that's when we need the resilience more than any other time.
I think so. One of the things that come up, because I've had some very, very dark times in my life, and so for anyone listening, then, and I thought I was the only one. And one of the things, you know, some people have experienced very little darkness. Some of us have experienced lots of it. And when we're in it, we do think that we're the only one feeling that, and we often think that no one else will get it and no one else will understand. And that's part of what keeps us trapped inside, because like, who's going to get it? And I'm just, you know, we make up all these wonderful stories around it. And so, as Paul said, you know, it really is important to reach out and to talk. And it can be like, you know, there are times when it was the hardware store guy. I used to go into the hardware store when there was a little hardware store, and we would have extraordinary discussions that he and I didn't have with any other person on the planet. That we had that discussion that just gave a little bit of space, opened the heart, and there was just a little level of grounding or centeredness or a little bit of peace, just to go, it's okay, I'm normal, have a bit of a laugh. So it can be anything from that simple to reaching out, and it's almost asking dangerous questions, what you think at the time are really dangerous questions, like, you know, reaching out to Paul or Angela or Alan or myself or someone else that you know, and what seems like a really dangerous question, you're going to go, oh yeah, you know, I get it. I get it. You know, I've been there, or yeah, I've helped people with that. So please, when you're listening, know that you're never ever the only one who has felt or is feeling what you're feeling. And there's a whole bunch of people out there just ready to listen to you.
And the people who are listening to you then, the message to them is to make sure you know what the other person's saying. The words they use, you need to qualify what exactly they mean by those, because we all have different definitions or meanings of different words, and we want to make sure that we hear that person correctly. And we need to be able to disconnect from the issue to be able to do that, because once we put our emotions into it, now we've got ourselves in that situation and we may not be hearing what they're actually saying. And
can I just pick up on what Heather said there?
Yeah.
I think we're talking about the person who's actually got the problem that's beyond their control. And I think what's important for the people who are listening who haven't got that problem, you can be that guy in the hardware store. You can be that woman in the post office with that listening ear. You know, and I think people forget that they can do that. Yeah. And I think that's important to sort of point out, really.
And everybody, you know, it doesn't have to be a coach. There can be anybody that you're talking to. But as I'm saying to anybody who is in that role, just take the time to listen, ask questions about, what do they really mean? Because, well, you were talking about smoking before, Heather, with your dad and everything else. My first wife, when we were together, smoked. And this was before we got engaged and everything else. And I'd said to her, look, I don't like the taste of it. In my diplomatic way, I made the comment it was like a dirty ashtray, kissing a dirty ashtray. And she said, well, if you buy me a dress, then that'll help give up. And I thought, well, the dress is not too dear. Well, the dress she had in mind was a wedding dress. So it was a costly one. So this message is there. Make sure that you know what the other person's saying before you jump in with a solution, because you never know what's going to happen.
And on the other hand, is if somebody comes to you and starts talking to you, ask them, are you having a vent? Or what I call a plum, poor little old me? Or do you want me to give you some suggestions? Because that will definitely then impact on how we respond. If I'm in a situation where somebody says, look, I really want your input, then I'll clarify the questions. I clarify the words. I get really clear on what kind of dress do are we talking about?
Exactly.
Somebody is just having I just really need to get this off my chest. I just say, basically, I'll just hold the bucket, spew into it.
That's it.
I'm just going to hold it and, and hopefully you'll feel better afterwards, but I'm not going to ask any questions.
It's a case of, is it this you want me to use, or is it this you want me to use?
Yeah.
And if it's this, then I stand back, I listen to it, but I don't get emotionally attached to it. Because that way then I know that if I'm not emotionally attached to it, I've got my ears open, I'm listening to what they're saying. I'm not going through my filter of my own emotions in the process.
So, sorry, go, Paul.
Sorry, go on, go for it.
No, you.
All right. I was saying that's really interesting what you said there, Angela, because I remember when I used to be a head teacher in a secondary school, and I had my management team, and we always had this rule that if you needed to rant and you needed to let off steam, you could come in the office, shut the door and say, I'm only here to have a rant. And I would listen. And I'd probably nod my head a few times and I'd smile. And after a couple of minutes, say, feel better now? Yeah. And they walk straight back out and get on with the day.
Yeah. That's it.
So some other language around that is one to rant. Other language, because, again, as we said, people have different language. One is to be witnessed. So you just listen and you witness someone in that. Another one is that you want validation. So you want someone to go, yeah, or no, yeah, no, whatever that is. And then the other one is, are you asking for possibilities? Yeah. And I'm really good at giving possibilities. And then I'm like, hang on, we're not asking for possibilities. You just, which one, what do you want? So as you say, Angela, having the language and having different options around that. And as we become more aware, then we can say, okay, I want to be validated, witnessed. I want possibility. Give me possibilities. I know I'm stuck in story. So having that awareness and then giving that listener that direction of what you need or desired from them is just great stuff.
But we have to teach people how to listen, because we have completely unlearned to listen. I mean, they say that the average person listens for 17 seconds before they make the first suggestion. I mean, how much information do you gather in 17 seconds? Not much. But we are really good at making, at fixing things. And as Alan was saying, it's often because we're really uncomfortable with what's happening and we just want to alleviate our as well as the other person's pain.
Yeah, but there is the opposite extreme where you can just do possibilities. It's like, I know I'm stuck in story. Give me possibilities. Sure. So you can start with the stories and it's like, all right, story, and give them something else, which is total disruption of the cycle. So there is that that range of being able to ask for what you actually desire in that.
But when you're in validation, if you're saying to somebody, validate,
absolutely,
often it becomes more dramatic than it actually was, because it creates that upward spiral. you know, especially if the other person knows exactly what this is about. They know the people, they've got previous knowledge of the situation, and it could, the validation could end up in, oh yeah, bastard, or God, how terrible.
That's it.
Then
That's
two
the
people
problem.
walk out, as you said, then two people walk out and they feel, and it's really worse than it was before.
Yeah, unless they're just ranting and want to be heard in that fucking bitch bastard, whatever, and just get it off the chest and then walk out and go, oh, cool, done with that.
I call that would be my witnessing thing. That would be the, I'm not getting emotionally involved in that.
Yeah.
That's it. It's just knowing having the wisdom as well to know, even if they haven't said so, is this a rant situation where they just need to get off, or a venting situation, they need to get off their chest? I mentioned before in other conversations, I had a guy who was sitting in the car next to me. Funny thing was, he was a mediator. We were involved with another group. It was all about a health forum. He wasn't getting on with one of the guys who was one of the other speakers. And we're in the car and he just went off on a rant. And at the end of it, I could see that he's getting tense and everything. And I said, can I ask you another question? He said, yeah, what's that? And I asked him the first question again. And the first question was, what are you going to do? But now, as you said with Heather, it changed the energy at that point. He got it out. So now I'd ask the question, that energy's gone. So there's no way he can answer it the same way again. And he just laid out a positive plan of how he was going to handle it. And I just went back to driving the car and he's looking at me going, oh my God, I'm the mediator and you've just done this. So I wasn't going to jump into that misery bed or that emotional bed and join him in that situation. It wasn't going to be helpful. And that's the other thing too, is knowing whether it's going to be helpful or healthy for you to get involved as that second party in trying to fix their problems. If I don't feel that I'm equipped for it, I stand back from it and I move them to somebody else or get somebody else to come and talk. You usually find that one of the people you do that with, well, I've got 3 sons and there's certain things that I just can't do with them because of our relationship. Because I am a relative. It needs, as you were saying before, we need that person who's not emotionally connected to it. And so changing the energy. So, yeah, we can have those things that we are, that we're responsible for and can change. We've got those things that we're responsible for, things that we're not responsible for, I should say, and can we change those? And can't we change them? So again, it comes down to all the situations that's going on at the time and what we know about ourselves as well. Are we doing this for the other people? Are we doing it for ourselves? And we can do stuff for ourselves and the outcome can also be helping the other people. Because I'm sure being stuck overseas as an expat, watching what's going on back here in Australia with the fires is devastating to the person over there in what they're feeling. But then getting involved as a group and doing something and sending things back, that's good for the people back over here as well. So there's times when it can be positive in both ways.
I think, can I just pick up what Angela said about listening earlier on as well? Because one of the stories that came out on our news over here was that there was an Australian company, they're British expats living in Australia, and they run a plumbing company. And they weren't in any of the areas affected, but they wanted to contribute and they wanted to help. And they had all these different ideas amongst themselves. But what they weren't doing was listening to what was needed. When they started listening to what was needed, they were more able to contribute. And what they did is the end result of that is they got like 6-inch diameter pipes. They cut them off at certain lengths and they made them feed stations for the wildlife. And that was their way of contributing. But until then, they were stuck for days. They just couldn't figure out how they could, as a company, contribute. But as soon as they started listening and listening carefully, that's when they got the result.
Well, it's like if you've got the ability to put things like doilies together and you put a whole mass of doilies together and you send them back to that location and what they need is fresh water. Yes, you felt good because you've sent something over, but it wasn't very good for the people that you sent it over for. So as you said, find out what's needed first. Then when you give, you know that you're actually contributing so much more that it makes the way you feel about it even stronger again, but also helps the people that you're trying to help as well.
Yeah. Because I think what you find as well is, and I think this was touched on earlier on from a societal point of view, is that, the people actually end up saying to government, but you're not listening to us. And when people feel listened to, then you can start bringing about results and bringing about change and affecting change. But it starts with listening. Everything starts with listening.
It does. There's a video floating around on YouTube that I use regularly in my presentations to explain how people communicate differently. It's called It's Not About the Nail. And it's a woman.
I love that video.
She's speaking, you can only see half of her face at the time, and she's talking about how she's got this pain and it's nagging and everything else. And then she turns around, so you've got her in profile, and she's got a nail, metal nail sticking out of her forehead. And the partner is just going, if you got that nail out of there, and she said it's not about the nail. All she wanted to do was be listened to first of all. And so it's quite a humorous way of presenting the differences, but it really highlights just how much different we are, but the need, and all she wanted to do was be validated. Once he validated her, then she was comfortable. But then there's a little bit that happens after it. So I just say, go do a search on YouTube and have a good giggle. It'll just see how crazy it is. And it highlights, and for us guys would say, well, yep, I can see that. That was my relationship with my partner, my wife or whatever. And the women are going, see, they're always trying to fix things. So it's, as you said, it's knowing what the other person needs that you're trying to help. Get that right first of all, and then do what you can, and that way you'll feel better about what you're doing. But always ask yourself, is this a positive thing for them that's helping them, or is it just helping me feel better about the situation I've been drawn into? So we've gone a bit over time, but each of you, if you've got any final words you'd like to share with the people after the conversation we had here today. Angela.
No, I just love the bow tie we wrapped around it. We started with fires, we ended with fires, and in between there was a whole ball of all sorts of things.
As I said, it starts out with a welcome to everybody, and then we start the subject, and it just goes where it goes. So I'd love to hear back from the other people who are listening to this. So Heather, any comments from you?
No.
Covered it all. How about you, Paul?
I think the only thing from me is, if you do find yourself in a situation, get support.
Yeah.
That's it. And tell the person what you want when you ask for that support so that they can deliver what you need.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what you need, that's okay too. And just tell them that you don't know what you need.
And have the conversation, and you never know what comes out of that.
Just like today.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I go, if you didn't know, what do you reckon the answer would be? And so how that triggers the brain to start giving some solutions. Fumble around at first, but all of a sudden, next thing you know, it's coming out. So people do know the answer, but because of everything else that's going on around them, that they can't see it. But in the right situation with the right people around them, then they can bring that out and find the solutions. Because for every problem on the planet, there is a solution of one form or another. So don't ever feel totally lost. Anyway, Angela, Heather, Paul, thanks very much for being here today. And I always love these. They're brilliant. And to everybody who's been listening in today, I hope you got something out of this. Always remember too, the audios of these are going up as podcasts, so you can listen to them on SoundCloud. I am looking at other platforms, so once we put on one, it goes out to all of them. Any comments on what you've heard today, any suggestions of what you'd like to hear about as well, put those in the comments field so that we can keep delivering what it is that you need. So here's me asking you to tell me what you want. So how can I help you with it? So I'm walking my talk. So thanks, guys, and to everybody else, thanks for being here. Bye for now.
Bye for now.